The new battle ahead for President Trump's border wall.
The stakes have been raised after he used his veto pen for the very first time on Friday, rejecting a bipartisan rebuke of his use of an emergency declaration to get money to fund the wall. So let's go to ABC News White House correspondent Tara Palmieri. Tara, good morning to you.
Good morning, Dan. It was the first challenge against the emergency declaration, and it was supported by members of his own party. But now the challenges are piling up as more and more lawsuits are filed. This morning, President Trump's defiant veto declaration under fire as the legal battle over border wall funding now heads to the courts.
I will be signing and issuing a formal veto of this reckless resolution, and that's what it was.
The president dealt a stunning rebuke when 12 Senate Republicans, including Marco Rubio, Rand Paul, and Mitt Romney, crossed party lines to vote in favor of a resolution terminating his emergency declaration.
Congress has the freedom to pass this resolution, and I have the duty to veto it, and I'm very proud to veto it.
Those Republican lawmakers calling the declaration an overreach of executive power by allowing the president to bypass Congress and access billions of dollars in military and treasury funds to build the wall.
It is a tremendous crisis. People hate the word invasion, but that's what it is. It's an invasion of drugs and criminals and people.
President Trump justifying his decision after Congress denied his request of $5.7 billion for a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. But the legal fight is just beginning.
I think we're going to win this court case, but just in the facts alone, there is no national emergency.
Attorney General Bill Barr insisting they are on solid legal ground.
Mr. President, your declaration of an emergency on the southern border was clearly authorized under the law.
The president's still not backing down, now asking for even more money for the border wall in his latest budget request of $8.6 billion. The president's veto will face another hurdle when the House votes in the coming weeks on whether to override it. But it's highly unlikely that will happen because you need two-thirds majority in the House and Senate to do so. And only 13 House Republicans broke with the White House to pass this bill. All
right, Tara, we'll stay on top of that. Thank you. Meantime, Senator Bernie Sanders suffering a minor head injury. The Democratic presidential candidate seen with a bandage on his head. He says he cut it on the edge of a glass shower door and needed 7 stitches to close that wound. Sanders is not expected to miss any events because of the injury.
Yeah, looks bad though there. Also on the campaign front, Beto O'Rourke is heading to Wisconsin this weekend. This will be O'Rourke's second visit to Madison in the last few weeks after he met with University of Wisconsin students in February. The Democratic candidate emphasizing the importance of Wisconsin in the 2020 race. On Monday, Democrats announced they will be holding their convention in Milwaukee.
It was a key state in 2016. So much to talk about here when it comes to politics. So let's go to Texas, home of Beto O'Rourke, and our chief political analyst, Matthew Dowd. Matthew, good morning to you. Let me ask you about another potential 2020 candidate, Joe Biden, the former vice president. He is set to appear at a big political event tonight in his home state of Delaware. So do you think he's going to run? And if he does, can he win the nomination?
Well, you've probably seen the movie Everest. The true story of Beck Weathers is when you think about Joe Biden and he's saying that he's 95% there, like Everest, the last couple hundred feet are the hardest part and the most difficult, and that's where most people stop. And I think he's still likely to get into this race. But I think those last couple hundred feet are the tough part in it. So I think he's obviously going through this. He has everything in order, but I think he's still deciding on this. If he gets in, he and Bernie Sanders are the front runners.
But there's so much enthusiasm on the left for having a person of color or a female candidate this year, and yet the front runners are Bernie and Biden. Do you think they'll be able to maintain that status, especially given the fact that front runners at this point often aren't the front runners by the time we get to the convention?
Well, you know, Dan, though Iowa and New Hampshire are a little less than a year away, the first real primary is in June when the debates start, and then there's a series of debates. There's going to be 7 or 8 debates before the Iowa and New Hampshire caucuses. That's really the test. Most of why Bernie and Biden are leading is driven by name ID because most of the others aren't known as well. So I think it's a question of the lasting power and the pressure on them. Can they perform at the debates, Bernie and Biden? And do they have the staying power for the next 11 or 12 months?
Matt, let me loop back, if I may, to the mass shooting, the massacres in New Zealand. Shootings like this often become politicized, and this morning we've got some criticizing President Trump for not going far enough to denounce white supremacy. Do you think that's a fair critique, or are people politicizing this tragedy?
Well, I think it's both. I think obviously this is politics, and what we do for the common good and these kind of tragic events, there is a political response needed. So it's both political, and people can make political criticisms. But I think much of the criticism that the president's faced in this is in many ways justified. Of course, the monster in New Zealand is responsible for what happened, awful for the killings and all of that. But we have to all ask ourselves, and the president, I think, it should take some time, I don't know if he will, and look in the mirror and sort of ask himself, are the words he used where he's pushed fear of Muslims, is the word he pushed a Muslim ban, is all of the things he's pushed at different groups, immigrants, refugees, calling things invasions, do they foment a hate in this country where then you become, by the use of your words, in many ways complicit in what the actions of a crazy person does in some jurisdiction. So I think the president ought to take some time and reflect on that. He doesn't have responsibility for the shooting, but he ought to look and see if he does have some accountability and the language he's used and what he's done that have allowed people to have that permission to do these awful things.
Matthew Dowd, so many complex questions on this Saturday morning. We really appreciate your analysis. Thanks again, Matt.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.